Hey guys, what is going on? It is your good buddy Sam, and I'm welcoming you to another exciting Max MSP tutorial. And if I sound a little self-satisfied, I am. It's because my friend Stefan's birthday is coming up, and I got him a pretty sweet gift. He's a big fan of Skrillex, and so I got him. He's a fan of two things in life: Skrillex and the application of high heat to raw red meat. And so I got him an apron with this printed on it. Don't tell him. I'm sure that he doesn't watch these videos, so there's no danger of him finding out. But I'm pretty excited about it. And also for showing off my Adobe Illustrator skills. This, by the way, is about the height of I'm about as good at Max as I am bad at Illustrator, which is why you're watching Sam's delicious Max MSP tutorials and not Sam explains how to draw lines with the pen tool. But in any case, let's return to this patch here. And you know, this patch used to stress me out, but I gotta be honest, it's Sunday. That's a lie. It's Saturday. And I'm just, chilling here with my cup of coffee and I'm looking at this patch and it's not so bad. We're gonna get through it. This patch is like, what is it? It's like that big stack of work that you don't really want to do, but you're going to get through it. At the end of it, there's a nice cold beer waiting for you. Only in my case, it's like 5 ice cold beers, so it's even better. What I noticed looking at this patch is that like this guy right here, this thing here, and these three things right here are all basically exactly the same. And the only difference between them is literally nothing. The only difference between them is in all three cases you've got some kind of curve driven by one of the, so remember there's timing phasers over here, and those timing phasers are generating some kind of curve that modulates the frequency, the frequency or pitch of a cycle here. So these cycles are being used as oscillators, and then you have something enveloping them. So in this case, it's an exponential curve. Over here, it's some kind of linear curve from these phasers, and then over here, you've also got some like brutal, forceful cutoff thing here. So what I'm trying to say is that we can take all of those and roll them up into one thing, and then we're going to have a lot more control and nuance over each one, and we'll actually be able to experiment with them and make some sounds as opposed to just having them live in this patch as they are now, static and difficult to understand squids of sound. Max stuff always looks like sound squids. Did you ever notice that? I did just now. So, first things first, see all of these, like I mentioned, take a phaser input and then generate some kind of curve from those. But one thing you'll notice is that some of these, the phaser says like, here, phaser 5, and then there's this R0 going into a 0.5, and here, phaser 0.125, R0 to a message box 0.75. That's setting the phase of the phaser, and the idea the author had here was to have all these, was the ability to make some of these phasers be offset. So instead of coming on the downbeat, he wanted the phaser to be synced to, say, the upbeat or the middle beat. Clearly my musical chops are not so strong, but I can illustrate the principle pretty simply here. If you've got two phasers, and they're both phaser 1s, come on, it's too early to type. This is the first thing I've typed all day. I haven't even checked my email today, so it's pretty impressive that I'm able to type. It's actually not that impressive, seeing as I type for a living. All right, so these are here, easy DAC, throw that mofo down there. Message 0, message 0.5, connect this like so, and this like this. And what you'll see if I turn the sound on and then make, say, a button that will hit both of these message boxes. So here are the phasers, they're both phaser 1s. Patch. You can see they're in sync. And then if I click this button, now they're exactly halfway out of sync. When this one's right in the middle, this one's at its extremum, and when this one's at its extremum, this one's right in the middle. So that's all the author is trying to affect with this R0 leading into a message box like this. But there's another better way to do it, which is just to modulate the phase using an offset. So if we do like plus tilde 0.5, that means this phasor, instead of going from 0 to 1, goes from 0.5 to goes from 0.5 to 1.5. And then if we take that modulo 1, modulo, remember, is the wraparound operator, so values like 1.5 become 0.5. And what this does essentially is just take this whole phasor, this adding and modulo is equivalent to shifting phase. So this just shifts the phase of the phasor by 0.5. And if I pass that down to this scope instead of that phasor, you can see that I've just generated another phasor curve that's halfway out of sync with this phasor curve. So that, my friends, is how we're going to handle all this in phase, out of phase nonsense, as opposed to the way the author of this patch tried to do it. So what am I saying? So the first thing at the ultimate top level of this patch is going to be receive. That receive is going to go down into an add tilde and a mod tilde 1. So phasor comes in, add tilde, mod tilde 1, and the first control that we're going to apply to this whole stack is something that lets you slidder. Nope, just a slider. And I'm going to set up the slider so that we can offset the phase by as much as one whole cycle. So that's the first control we're going to add to this. Now, the next thing that I mentioned is that each one of these has the phasor going into some kind of thing generating a curve for the cycle. So clearly we're going to need the gain here, probably a little guy over. I can hear sounds from all over this patch because this patch is crazy, so let's just turn down these gains. Can we still hear sounds? No. Cool. Can't though. Oops. Okay. Oh my God, there's a chorus of birds outside. Quit ruining my morning, birds. I'm trying to listen to electronic music. Okay. So, sorry, my ire against the animal kingdom distracted me there. So, like I mentioned, there's one kind of curve we can generate. There's no space here. I need more space. So one kind of curve that we can generate is using this, you remember from a couple of videos ago I talked about taking this phasor and reshaping it using this logarithm and these multipliers. So that's going to be one way that we can modulate our cycle. So bring our phasor up like so and feed that into this log, and then that cycle out here. This will give you a certain kind of sound. Only it's not making a sound because is something coming out of here? Sound is off. Now sound is on. Okay, it's probably not exactly the sound we wanted, but regardless, that's the sound. Okay, so to make that sound a bit more sound-like, remember there were 3 parameters that were sort of interesting to control with that log, and they were the steepness of this log, the amount we subtract this by, which is how fast we get to that lower value, and the height, the highest frequency of the phasor. So we set the highest frequency to like 10,000. The cut down speed, how fast it ramps down to the lowest value, like 5 or something, and then we'll subtract like, I don't know, 400 here, and what does this sound like? Yeah, you can hear a bit more clearly what's going on. So anyway, that's one way to generate the frequency curve for this thing. The other way is the way this object up here does it, by taking the phasor, turning it into discrete bangs, and then using that to drive the curve object. So what we're going to do is copy this logic here, this delta tilde into a less than tilde 0 into an edge tilde. Use that to, where did that even paste? Oh, way over here. Use that to generate the curve, or to generate bangs. And then we'll feed those bangs into a curve object, like so. And we can use these to generate our curve. So I want these parameters to all be modular. So what I will, modular? To be modulatable. So I'll make a pack, doesn't matter what this first argument is, float, float, float. And then we'll make 3 parameters over here that you can set 1, 2, 3. And now bangs from this edge will trigger this pack to do its thing. So 3,250. We'll change the text of this message box to read $1, comma, $2, $3. And now, what's coming out of this pack object are going to be messages that will go into this curve and generate an envelope curve for this, or an amplitude curve, or not an amplitude curve. My God, Sam, figure out what words you're saying. Not an amplitude curve, but a frequency curve for this cycle. The hell was that? Somebody maybe just threw like a penny at my window or something. It scared the shit out of me. -1. Okay, so this now will generate a curve for this object here. So if we get rid of this thing and add this thing to tell our cycle what to do, nothing's happening. Why? Except generating that incredibly shrill sound for which I apologize. Okay, that's definitely doing its thing. This is going into the cycle. This curve object is generating a constant 3015. Well, there's your problem. That should read 1, comma, and then go down to the second. Oh, I see. I'm a big dummy. This should read $2, $3, $4, because the first, there we go, because the first argument is just a bang. So this is saying, pack together B followed by 315, 204, 88, and this message box here says, okay, forget that first thing, the B, whatever it is. First, tell the curve to jump to the value 3015, and then tell it to go to the value 204 over the course of 88 milliseconds. And over here, we're controlling the curve. So just two different curves doing the exact same thing. Finally, the last thing we want to be able to do, of course, is go between these two curves. So we might want to use this model, or say this model, to determine which frequency curve, or which curve we're going to use to generate the frequency for our cycle object. And so I'm just going to use a selector tilde object, selector tilde. Set it to have 2 inlets and to default to the first one being open. We'll make a text button here. Text button, set it to be a toggle, and make it have it give it better colors like blue and orange, blue and green, blue and red, blue and orange. Damn it. It's frustrating that my lack of skill at Illustrator is now bleeding into Max. I can't even pick good colors. Feed that into the selector. And let's rename this to say something that sounds like we know what we're talking about, like model A and model B. Just two different sort of signal paths, each of which generates an exponential curve, but each of which also sounds slightly, or might have slightly different properties, hence model 1 and model 2. This gain I want to be automatically horizontal or vertical based on how I stretch it. Make some more room for myself like this. I have a weird feeling that watching me drag objects around this patch, I always feel like I should edit it out, and then some weird voice in my head says, no, that's actually the most entertaining. Like, I think it's my brilliant and witty commentary that's entertaining, but secretly, or not so secretly, I'm pretty sure it's just watching me drag objects around that's actually enjoyable. Cool, so this is it. We're done with this little part of it. Now we've got the phaser coming in here. We can adjust the offset of the phaser relative. This here just tells us, are we on the downbeat, are we in the middle, are we on the upbeat, whatever. This here generates one exponential curve, this generates a different exponential curve, and then here we can pick which one we use to tell our oscillator to go from a certain high frequency value to a low frequency value. So let's hear what that sounds like real quick. So here we're using model A, and now model B. I mean, they're both just modulating the frequency according to some exponential curve, but they're doing it in different and interesting ways. So that's pretty sweet. We've got our cycle here going, and we've got it modulating. The next thing that we want to look at is applying some envelope. We don't need you anymore, get out of here. Applying some envelope to this curve. So you'll see if you look at, say, this one, that you've got bangs coming in that are driving another exponential curve here, and then we're multiplying this oscillator. Taste of my coffee. Instant coffee. I swear, I am the least snobby coffee person you'll ever meet. I like it instant, and I like it fast. Gonna let that one sit for a while. So, bangs coming in here from the phasor, going to the curve object, multiplying that by the cycle, so applying some envelope. And then over here, same thing going on, phasor, multiplying the cycle, just a different way of generating a envelope curve for the object, but ultimately doing the exact same thing. So again, we've got two different models for generating an envelope for our object. So first thing we're going to do is grab this one. And we called this thing using this exponential curve generator model B before, so I'll put that off to the right to make room for this guy, model A. Multiplying it by -1, adding 1, and then clipping. This is again just some stuff that reshapes the curve so that it looks a little bit, so instead of going from 0 to 1, it goes from 1 to 0. That's all that's doing. In fact, there's probably a cleaner way to do this. In fact, there is a cleaner way to do this. In fact, why don't we just replace this with a cleaner way to do this, which is scale tilde. Well, scale tilde doesn't exist in Max 5, so we'll just leave it as is. Cool, so this all looks pretty good. Remember, this is one way to generate an envelope. And so I will do this with the patch cord. This is another way to generate an envelope. Again, we want to turn the signal into bangs, so I'll use this delta less than 0 edge tilde trick. And if you're watching this video and you're like, what the fuck is going on with all of this stuff? I highly recommend watching a video from 1 or 2 tutorials ago where I talk about kind of the general principle behind all of these objects and how they're being used within the context of this patch. I think it's pretty helpful. Well, this will give you maybe a slightly better sense of what's going on here. So once again, curve, I want to make what goes into it something that we can control. So I'm just going to copy 0.805,000 off to the side here so I can remember it. And then just copy all this stuff, which we used a second ago in order to actually be able to control the parameters of our exponential curve. And then if I set this somewhere like here, and then make this 0.8, go down to 0. So this is jump to 0.8, go down to 0 over the course of 5,000 milliseconds. And again, we're going to need the selector. Going to need this model AB stuff again. Put that in the selector. And now we've got two different curves. So this is generating the envelope curve for the frequency of the cycle, and this is generating two different envelope curves for the amplitude of the cycle. So these will essentially let us apply some cutoff or some amplitude envelope to the sound. Once we multiply the output of this oscillator by the envelope, over here. Let's feed all that in like so. Feed her! Really, Sam? A human centipede reference? And this should sound pretty reasonable. Or if we turn up the volume, we may be able to hear it. Cool, so let's take a look at so this guy, for example, we can see is using model A for the envelope curve, and then model B for the frequency curve, and it's going from 3,000 to 200 over the course of 50 milliseconds with a really sharp curve on that thing. Yeah, okay, and so this should sound more or less like this. Let's test. So here's A, here's B. Well, you'll notice they don't sound too dissimilar, except for this one rings a lot longer. And the reason it's ringing longer is because we've left out one thing, which you can see right here at the end. So we've got this delay one thing here going into this gate that's shutting off the whole sound really abruptly right at the end. We don't have that model yet, so last thing we need is this brute gate here. So I'm going to bring this gate down here. We're going to need this logic, this delay 20 with the bang and the one message box. And then, so here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to use this delta edge nonsense again over here. Let's put this down here so it's out of the way. And we're going to count bangs just like we're doing over here, except what I'm going to do is make a gate, and every time one of these bangs comes through, what we're going to do is first send a bang to this one, and this one is going to open up this gate and let through this signal. So the signal is going to be going through every time we get a bang, we start letting the signal through, like this. Then what we're going to do is send a bang to this delay here, and this delay is going to shut off this gate like this. So now we'll hear this thing cut off abruptly after 20 milliseconds. See, we don't hear that long tail anymore because this gate here is shutting off the sound. But what I want to do is make it so that we can turn this off. So I'm going to just change this button to read. So let's see, cut off off, cut off, cut off off, cut off off, and cut off on. And we'll make this red so you really know when that cutoff is on. And cut off on. Yeah, scary red. Oh, okay, apparently I botched that. Oh, I see, I set the same text twice, like the genius that I am. Cut off on. Don't know what happened there. It's very confusing. Cut off, cut off on. Great. Cut off on, cut off off, cut off on. It's like some kind of Turkish incantation. Only not really? I don't know. My Turkish is weaker than my Illustrator, which is, oh man, really saying something. Okay, that gate feeds into this delay, that delay into this gate, and all of a sudden, man, we've got that crazy cutoff from the other synth going on. So now we should be able to model all four of these synthesizers, these little synthesizer chunks, using this master synth that we've built, and much more. Because we've got all these controls built in, we can do whatever we want and even generate whole new exciting sounds. So see, I can turn the cutoff off, and here it is on. Right? Totally different. Cool. So now we just need to wrap this up, do some, what do you call it, encapsulation, and then we should be in pretty amazing shape. So I'm going to start just by kind of recognizing that this thing here, this frequency starts at 10,000, this one starts at 3,000. Those are actually both kind of doing the same thing, so I'm going to merge those into one parameter like so. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. Other than that, this is looking pretty okay. So all this stuff is basically our oscillator. So I'm going to Control-Shift-E that. Oh, wow. Oscillator. Okay. Deal with all that stuff in a second. And over here, this is the envelope. So we will call this, you know what? No, that's okay. And this is all the envelope, so I want to call this envelope. Again, super messy, but I'll clean it up in a second. And finally, this over here is the cutoff. So we're going to call this cutoff. Cool. And now just give me a second to clean this up a little bit, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, so you didn't miss much. All I did was go through these, encapsulate stuff, move stuff around, clean it up a bit, and then I labeled helpfully all of these inlets and outlets, or rather just these inlets, so that you could see like what you're dealing with here. So here, the input the input phasao. It's not actually a phasao; it's a phasor, obviously. Input phasor. Also say input phasor. Nope, didn't label it because I'm a lazy man. Input phasor 0, 2, 1. Cool, and now what I want to do is actually have this thing be able to replace each of these things. And so that's going to involve 2 steps. In the first step, I want to add some controls that actually cover a reasonable range of this. So give me 1 second to do that. What I'm going to do is for each one of these, say for example, for this control, I know this is a value or rather for I don't know, this is a frequency control that I know is interesting in the range of 200 to, or rather, I don't know, 40 to 20 kilohertz. So what I'm going to do is add the live.dial stuff is really great for this, because what you can do with live.dial is set the unit style to hertz, and then set the type to float, and then make the range enumeration go between 20, or I don't know, yeah, why not, 20 and 20,000. And then critically, the exponent down here you can set to say 2. And what that does is now you see if I have a floating point box down here, as I drag this up to the middle, it's already 5.9 kilohertz, or rather it is not already, but it is 5.9 kilohertz, which is critically not halfway between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. Halfway between would be 10,000 hertz. But because we set the exponent to 2, we get more meat down in sort of the lower range and less up here in the higher range. I think even an exponent of 3 might be good. But in any case, what it does is it gives us more dynamic range down here in the low frequencies and less up in the high frequencies, which makes sense. I mean, ideally, this would be like an octave specific range, if that makes sense. It would be a range where you'd have equal amount of fineness over every octave or so. So anyway, that's what that exponent is doing, and that's what makes it really nice. So all I'm going to do is figure out good controls for each of these, label them, and hook them back up, and I'll be right back with you. Very exciting. Cool. So I just gave all those labels and meaningful values. And the last thing I wanted to do was make it so that these guys could actually, I wanted to make some presets so that these could all be the same as these over here. So if you give me just 1 second, I will do that as well. Hey, so it turns out I wasn't quite right about how these things worked. And see, this guy goes down to 50. His minimum value is 50. but each of these is a minimum value of 0. So I needed I just needed to connect this parameter that controlled the lowest value that the frequency could go to. I had the highest value the frequency could be connected to both models, but the lowest frequency I had connected only to model B, so I just connected them to both. Now, where was I? Also, the minimum of this needs to actually be 0. 0 hertz. Now let's listen. So it turns out there's one thing left in here that I didn't account for, which is that this one also has a kind of cool distortion on it. Basically, the signal is being multiplied by this cycle object here. The cycle, it's then, so they're multiplied together, so it's scaling up that signal and then adding a value to it and clip distorting it. So it's just some very, very simple clip distortion, but it sounds pretty cool. And so all we're going to do, this doesn't really matter, this parameter here. All I'm going to do is take this and just make another, basically we're throwing another effect in the effects chain. So I have a new thing here that's just like distortion bypass off, bypass off, bypass on. So whenever this is, we'll make a gate here, gate, oh no, so no, it makes sense to do, makes sense to have a selector, and then we'll add 1. Okay, so by default, we will not bypass. And then when bypass is on, we will bypass. So let's see, we've got this clip here. We want the signal to feed into this guy and also into the selector. And then when bypass is on, we won't use this clip distortion, and when bypass is on, we will use the clip distortion. So moving this over like so, just a little bit. I wonder where this particular parameter came from for the thing, and then let's see, all we have to do now is turn this thing on. We want a little distortion, so now I want bypass off, and ours should have some distortion on it. Or just be totally silent, because the signal is not being put in here. That's what we wanted. See, that's how ours sounds. How does theirs sound? And what does this one sound like? Bit more like that. Great, sounds good to me. So now, perfect. I finished that stupid ordeal. C has no offset, and you have an offset of 0.5, so it better be about here. Great, so that's every one of these silly things all set to have the right offset. My God, so frustrating. Okay, so I can get rid of these finally, and get rid of this one as well. And now each one of these 5 things, man, control one of those originals. So we're making slow but steady headway through this patch. Eventually, I guess maybe in the next video we should go through and like turn, because this is all, look at this, mostly this is just interface, and we should move the interface into things here that you could control, like basically make Max for Live devices out of these. I don't know, we'll see how it goes, but in any case, I should be able to save this patch now, close it. Don't save that. Open recent patcher, open that one back up, and then after turning down this knob, this knob, this knob, coming over to these guys, I should be able to hear each one of these. It's basically how he should sound. Is indeed how he sounds. Yeah, that's basically what we ought to be hearing. That is indeed that little component of the grander patch. You could be a little, oh no, you didn't actually, no, I lied. That one's not set correctly. Something happened with you. Yeah, this should be 10,000, 0. Yeah, that's much better for that. Bypass off, cutoff off. I don't know why I didn't save. But in any case, that all looks much better. I'm not thrilled about how much effort it took to get that to work, but whatever, it's working. I'm happy. Thanks for watching. Oh man, this is going to be the ratio between the edited and unedited length of this video is going to be higher than for any other one of these ever done ever. But hopefully that was exciting, and hopefully you can see, man, we're making some headway on this patch. It's getting bigger rather than smaller, which is sort of alarming. But over time, we are going to get there, man. Just one day at a time. We're going to take it one day at a time, and we're going to get through this beast of a patch. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys very soon.